Would you look at that? We finally made it. It's my number one team in my 2025 NFL Deep Dive Series. It's the Baltimore Ravens. What a journey we've been on, guys. I really appreciate everyone for watching all these videos. 30 plus, almost 40 hours worth of videos and content, and triple that for editing and everything. It's just been a lot of work, but it's still a lot of fun. I don't know if I'm going to post my Excel sheet that I had. I know TFG likes to do that. I don't know. Maybe I'll start a Patreon for 99 cents. You guys can subscribe to it and look at it. I don't know. I don't know. Whatever. Long road here to number one, and it's a long road for the Baltimore Ravens, to be honest. They are far and away my number one team. There's the largest gap between two rankings from number one to number two. It was shockingly high, which tells you what to expect here coming up. A great coaching staff, a great culture, a great quarterback in Lamar Jackson, the best two-way quarterback, I guess you can call him, runner, thrower, really improved on his throwing. We'll get to that. The weapons group they have, they rounded it out so nicely, bringing in DeAndre Hopkins, making sure they re-signed all the right players. They have the best running back in the league. Spoiler alert, Derrick Henry. We'll get to that as well. The offensive line has got a lot of question marks to it. It's not a great offensive line at all. We'll get to the assessment I have of them, but shocking considering how efficient they are on the offensive side. Then on the defense, just carrying over that Mike McDonald defense that they've had from years past. With Kyle Hamilton, they signed Jair Alexander, just rounding out a secondary that's going to be so incredibly dominant, I think, this season. Roquan Smith, great leader there at the linebacking group. A balanced defensive line that's still waiting to have a true breakout star. Nnamdi Madubuike had that great contract year and hasn't really reached that height again of that true dominance, that defensive player of the year caliber season. So we'll get to that. And the overall question marks on this organization is, can they win the big one? There's been a lot of struggles here. They have a great regular season team. They'll come in high in these kind of rankings, but can they win the big one in the playoffs? That's a huge question mark that's sort of looming, a huge dark cloud that's been looming over this team now for a couple of seasons. And it starts them getting over it with the coaching staff, and it starts with John Harbaugh. He's my fourth ranked head coach, and he's one of the guys who was, when he was hired, he's allowed to be the CEO head coach, and he's always sort of been allowed to be that from the very beginning of his arrival in Baltimore, because he wasn't hired as this great offensive or defensive mind when he was brought in by the Ravens. I talked about this in the Chiefs video, that there's not a whole lot of Andy Reid disciples. John Harbaugh is an Andy Reid disciple. He was part of Andy Reid's staff, Philadelphia, that led to him getting this job, and he was the special teams guy and everything, and he really set the tone for how he got players motivated, because it's really tough to get guys who were these superstars in high school, these superstars in college, to come in and all of a sudden just be these bench warmers who kind of get on the field for special teams sometimes. And to get those guys motivated to deal with the egos that are at play there, it takes a special type of coach to be able to do that and truly get the best out of those people. And that was the thing that Harbaugh brought over when he became the head coach here. And he's been able to maintain it his entire tenure, though he did inherit a pretty good team with a really good foundation, a really good leadership built into it with Ray Lewis and all those guys. He still was able to change things enough to suited his style, and he's been able to carry that on. They've had some down years, obviously, but for the most part, through the years with Joe Flacco, all the way now to with Lamar Jackson, despite having some turnover in the coaching staff and some major points in the roster, he's been able to put together a really great staff and has been able to develop all of his blue chip players. They've done they got a lot of first round picks, and they've developed a lot of really great talents. And then they've made the most out of them for the ones that didn't really achieve the highest level. They've still found a role for them where they were able to be significant contributors every single week. And then it's just a matter of whether or not they decide to bring them back or not, sign them back or not. But every single, of these top picks that have come in, these top prospects that have come in the Harbaugh era, for the most part, they're either brought back or they have a great year at some point in their tenure that allows them to get paid. Patrick Queen's a good example. And he gives opportunities to these younger coaches all the time, like you saw we did for Mike McDonald, who made this defense at one point in time 2 years ago one of the best defenses ever. That's saying a lot, especially for this organization, considering what they've had over the years, over the last 25 years. And then he goes and gets a head coach job. They bring in Zach Orr, and Zach Orr really filled that role nicely. And that's why he comes in as my 15th ranked defensive coordinator, because he did really, really well with continuing with what McDonald did. Now, were they as good? Were they as strategically sound? No, but that's because Zach Orr is he's still working on that. He's still learning. He was hired in-house. He was elevated in-house. Promoted. So he needs to he's still finding his own style to a degree. But I thought, for considering the situation he was in and the pressure that he was probably under, he did a really great job. And you didn't see any regression from anybody. At least at a significant level. Like maybe Matt Abuike, just what he was in that contract year is as good as he'll ever be, and he kind of went down a notch back to what he probably normally is. But the overall defense still performed really strong. They didn't really have any brutal performances where you felt like they were out-coached by the opposing team. So kudos to Zach Orr, and seeing his star continue to rise is going to be something to watch here. But this team is really, with all that said, despite having great defenses and historically having great defenses, this is really the first time, this era, where they're really an offensive team. And it's Todd Monken's offense, who he's coming in, he's the best offensive coordinator, I think, in the whole league. He's the top offensive mind coming out in the 2026 head coaching cycle. The way that he was able to maintain what made Lamar Jackson and this offense great, what made the motor run, what made them so incredibly dangerous, the way he was able to maintain that while also creating a scheme, and through planning and all that, got Lamar Jackson to play at his highest level ever as a passer, where he brought Lamar Jackson to the dance of being no longer just a great running threat who can kind of throw it. Like he's not Jalen Hurts anymore. He's not in that category anymore. As a thrower, he's in the category of like the top passers in the league, and we'll get to him shortly. But Monken deserves a lot of credit for creating situations for where Lamar could build that confidence and actually start attacking the field with that aspect of his skill set, while also maintaining a tremendous run game that we saw with Derrick Henry. Now, it helps to have Derrick Henry, of course, but we've seen time and time again older running backs go to other organizations and they just can't perform. Derrick Henry was not that at all. We saw drastic improvements from Isaiah Likely. He elevated yet another level. We saw Rashad Bateman really play his best ball. We saw Zay Flowers play some really good ball. We saw Mark Andrews fight through adversity and then stick with him rather than doing what a lot of people were calling for, which is to trade him. Todd Monken stuck with him, and eventually Andrews got in there and he was still performing at a really high level. The offensive line is obviously something that needs to be addressed. We'll get to that. But from just a week-to-week preparation standpoint and a variety of different looks and some exotic things that they were doing in the passing game as well as the run game, Todd Monken was just putting on a clinic as to how you properly run an offense and how you get the most out of your skill sets. And Harbaugh giving them the freedom to do that can't be understated. Now, Harbaugh does have the same issue that I think some of these other coaches have, like a LaFleur and like McDermott in Buffalo and all that, where they have this great roster, They're always a threat. They're always dominant. But then something happens when they get to the playoffs. And it just seems like things start to go off the rails a little bit. I mean, 2 years ago, we saw them completely get away from what made them an effective offense. Like, they all of a sudden just became like this pretty drop-back passing offense and got absolutely run off the field in one of the most embarrassing performances ever. And then last year, you know, a couple things go wrong here and there, and they end up getting knocked out. So how does Harbaugh make sure that everyone on his staff and all of his players maintain the level of composure when the pressure is truly on? Because they play the regular season, because they are such a good team, they kind of play the regular season without a whole lot of pressure, especially when you have teams in your division that have been struggling the last couple of seasons, like Cleveland, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh. You know, they've all kind of had their struggles the last couple of years. The division hasn't been like this super difficult division to play in the way that it used to be, you know, maybe 5 years ago. You know, the last couple seasons, it's kind of been a softer division to a degree, despite, you know, Cincinnati still having that effective offense. They haven't really been able to put it together. Pittsburgh sort of has like this middle of the pack always playing, and Cleveland's just been a dumpster fire. So how does John Harbaugh bounce back? Because this is a tremendous opportunity for his team to win that big one. But he needs to make sure that he's got everyone on the same page and that they don't get too caught up in the moments, apparently, from not only a player standpoint, from a coach's standpoint. You know, like 2 years ago, he let the entire plan just get away from them. And they tried to be a completely different team than what made them successful. Now he just needs to, I feel like they kind of figured that out last year, but now carrying it over, they need to make sure that everyone's mentally on the same page, that the pressure isn't getting to anybody, that everyone treats every game the same, so in that way they don't fall apart in certain key areas of the game where you go, man, if that one thing just went differently, they would have won. The teams that are great, the teams that are champions, don't have those moments. So that's the one task that he has left now with this roster and with this staff, is to eliminate that moment in those big time games. I was really hoping to have an ad break here, but I don't. And that's okay. As long as you guys subscribe and like this video, then, you know, the next time you see me on here, I'll have ad breaks and I'll be making monies, and then I'll be much happier because then I can have this as my job, rather than a day job and then doing this for free because I love you guys. Do you love me? Hit the subscribe. Now let's get to Lamar Jackson. He's the third to fourth. He's in there. I got him tied with Patrick Mahomes for being a passer. Now that is a drastic improvement from what you would say about him even last year, especially 2 years ago. You look at what he was able to do this year, and he was phenomenal throwing the ball. Now let's talk about what he used to be. For the longest time, Lamar Jackson was this, obviously great athlete, but as a passer, he was somebody that you need to operate like in the intermediate areas inside the numbers, regardless of the level of the field. Once you got to like outside the numbers and that ball needed to travel with a little bit more precision, a little bit more power, a little bit more accuracy, all that's where he really struggled. And that's how you would beat Baltimore. So you would really crowd inside the numbers and force them to pass the ball deep down the outside of the field. And it was something that worked really well for opposing defenses. And it was the Achilles heel. What they were able to do this year, what Lamar was able to prove this year, is that he now has added that aspect to his game. So now he was executing deep and outside the numbers at a level that I don't think anyone was really able to anticipate coming into the season, like an honest assessor of Lamar Jackson. I'm not talking about like a Baltimore fan or like these fair weather fans that are like been calling Lamar the greatest quarterback of all time and all that kind of stuff. Talk about like a fair assessment of what Lamar is as a player. And when he started to do that, that's when, you know, the eyebrows start to get raised and you go, he's reached another level now that so few with his skill set have been truly able to reach. You know, like he's now got to that like Josh Allen level of being able to pass it while also being a great athlete. Because when you look at what he was able to do, like his deep ball and his intermediate levels, it was A+ performances, 30 big time throws. They were pushing that ball down the field. And he only had 8 turnover worthy plays. That type of ratio is amazing. You throw in how great he was in play action, obviously that helps. Having Derrick Henry, and he plays really fast in play action, so that helps as well. The defense kind of just has to make like a split-second decision. So when they make the wrong decision, or if they just play pass the whole time, for example, then Lamar is able to get on the outside, he's going to run. And he's going to pick up 10 yards. So you kind of got to account for that, so that opens up the passing game in a huge way in play action as well. And then when he's kept clean, like he was navigating the pocket really well. He was, he was confident in there. He wasn't so quick to just bail on clean pockets the way that we were used to seeing him do. When he was blitzed, he was amazing at that. He knew where his escape routes were. He knew where the plays were going to be open. And he was really quick at assessing all that. And that goes to show a lot of pre-snap analysis. And that shows a lot of pre-game preparation. When he was under pressure, he was probably the best under pressure quarterback in the league last year. He was so dialed in that when he was under pressure, he was still able to escape. He was still able to use his athleticism, and he was able to throw a very accurate ball even while under those conditions. So he took his game to another level, to an absolute other level. Now there's aspects obviously to his game that are still not as great overall as what you would get from a Josh Allen or a Joe Burrow. But if he's able to maintain this level, then there's no reason why he can't go from being just the best running quarterback in the NFL to the best running quarterback and the best passing quarterback as well. Because the weapons around him, they're maintaining them. They've still run a lot of 12 personnel, a lot of 13 personnel. They're still going to run that. That's still the bread and butter of their offense. That's still the huge part of their offense is throwing the ball inside the numbers, along the hashes, up the seams, and all that. Because that's where Lamar really is truly at his best. So that's still a huge part of the offense. But now that he's added this extra layer to what he does, this extra layer that makes him completely well-rounded, now the defense has to account for that. And that's going to open up all these huge opportunities now for Zay Flowers on the outside, for Rashad Bateman on the outside, for whoever else you want to add as an outside wide receiver for yourself. Like DeAndre Hopkins is now there. He could be a huge contributor now on the outside. He can have like a career renaissance statistically based upon what they're going to be able to do now, because you're going to execute inside the middle of the field with Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Derrick Henry, Justice Hill, Charlie Kolar to a degree, Zay Flowers. And that defense is going to have to start collapsing. And then you're going to run the read options where Lamar's going to be able to break it out. So you're going to need to stack these boxes to be able to account for that. And now with Lamar being able to just put the ball in Henry's gut, pull it out, and execute a deep ball down the sidelines with ultimate precision and accuracy, it's almost like you've created an unstoppable offense now. Now, it could be a situation where it was just a one-year thing, and defenses are going to figure it out, and Lamar is going to go regress back. Maybe he's just not a big-time quarterback either. There's a huge possibility that's the case for him. That he's just not. His mind operates too fast. He can't slow down the process enough mentally to stay calm in big-time situations. There's a huge possibility that's a real thing with him. Not saying that the last playoff loss was his fault. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not even saying 2 years before that it was his fault. Because I think everyone watching that game kind of saw that the play calling in that game was absolutely horrific. But there is an aspect of confidence and being cold-blooded in those situations that we've seen from Joe Burrow, that we've seen from Patrick Mahomes, that we just haven't seen from Lamar Jackson, that we haven't seen from Josh Allen either. And it's ironic that those two quarterbacks are my top two teams. The ones that evidently I think have the most to prove in big-time situations. And I think Lamar's got the most to prove out of everyone. Because I think so much is expected of him. I think the hype train has been so big behind him. And I think finally now, at this stage in his career, he has the skill set, he has the weapons, and he's got the coaching to get over that moment. Like, there's nothing really else he can add to his tool belt of talent and of what he can bust out. You know, he'll run a great bootleg. He'll do a 7-step drop and throw the ball perfectly over the middle of the field. He'll make an adjustment at the line of scrimmage and change a play and run and have the right hot receiver ready to go. He'll make the right adjustments to the offensive line when it comes to slides and blitz pickups. He does all that now. So it's really just a matter of what is he going to be in those big-time game situations. Like, get your fingers on the laces there in the photo, as you can see. Maybe that's a start. But I think that's nitpicking at this point because it's hard to pick out anymore the deficiencies in his game. It's amazing to see. And somebody that's been hypercritical of him over the years, I got no legs to stand on now from a critic standpoint, I feel, when it comes to his ability as a thrower and his ability as overall to perform as a quarterback in an offense where he's able to not only operate the system that he's in, but also to improvise at such an elite level that it just makes opposing defenses completely helpless every single time that the offense is out on the field. And it makes them virtually unstoppable, where the defense is kind of just hoping that they play it fundamentally sound enough that they just hope that someone on the offense makes a mistake. You know, Mark Andrews drops a ball at the goal line type of a thing. Isaiah Likely doesn't tap his toe inbounds at the end of the game in the back of the end, like that kind of stuff. And they have the third best weapons group out of everyone in the league here. It's a group that, you know, has a lot of balance. They got a plethora of different talents and skill sets that they use all in the exact ways that maximize their skill sets. You know, this is a group that is ranked incredibly high without having like this top level number one wide receiver. And it starts with Zay Flowers, who's their best receiver right now. He operates a lot on the outside, but I think now when you add D-Hop in here, you'll see him take, you know, that 38% slot snaps. I think that'll probably get boosted up maybe to around 45%, you know, because again, they do run a lot of 12 personnel where they won't have 3 wide receivers on the field a lot of the time. So he'll still take a majority outside wide receiver snaps here. But he was surprisingly good in contested catches. You know, he did have some drop issues there for a bit where you're kind of like, oh, like, why do you have 6.3% drop rate? Like, get that down a bit. Like, there's some ugly drop. There's a couple ugly drops that he had in there where you're like, ugh, you know, that it's the thing holding you back from being like an elite level wide receiver. But on 74 catches to have over 1,000 yards, he only got in the end zone 4 times. You know, Derrick Henry's the touchdown poacher. The run game, to a huge degree, is the touchdown maker. He did a great job deep down the field. Great job in the intermediates. An amazing screen wide receiver, which in those RPO situations where you have the run pass option, where the pass option is that little bubble screen out there to Zay Flowers, when Lamar was making those decisions, Zay was just great at executing them. As they start to open up this offense a little bit more, and I think as they start to get comfortable letting Lamar sling it a little bit more, I think you can see him get into that elite level wide receiver category, especially because so much more attention has to be given to a lot of the other targets out there, especially the run game. You know, you have to have a linebacker there and to spy. So there's just one less guy out there for him to have to worry about, and for him to execute, I think, particularly in the slot on those intermediate drags, on those deep posts, on those double moves down the field and everything. I think he's going to be able to really work those areas a lot more. In the short areas, he is really small, so he can get lost in there, and it's kind of hard to get him the ball. Yeah, get over the lineman, but then down enough for him to catch it at I think he's like 5'9" or something like that. So that's tough for Zay Flowers. It's a tough area for him to work in this offense, especially one that does like to stay within the numbers more often than not. So I think if they start to expand outside the numbers a lot more, I think he can work more in the short areas, but I think also he doesn't need to. He does so many other things well that you don't need to use him in those ways. You can use other guys. You can use some of your bigger tight ends in that role. His compliments at wide receiver, it's Rashad Bateman and it's DeAndre Hopkins. They're going to be like the two primary outside wide receivers when they get into 3 wide receiver sets. I do think D-Hop kind of yields to Bateman when they're in that 12 personnel, 22 personnel. He won't be the guy out there. That'll be Bateman's role. But I think this is, like I said earlier, I think this is a huge opportunity for DeAndre Hopkins to have like this statistical renaissance where, he might only get 70 targets this year. Maybe he only gets 45 catches. But I think it'll be a hell of a performance. I could see him being like a 45 catch, 700-yard receiver this year, just because of what they're going to have him doing and how they're going to execute him. Then you got some wide receiver depth. Tylan Wallace sort of sits there as your special teams guy at this point. Tez Walker, who's former North Carolina wide receiver who they had some hopes for, who hasn't really come through, but he stays on the team. So maybe, he watches Hopkins play and learns a little something, gets some opportunities. LaJohntay Wester is also on the roster as a rookie. Justice Hill, they still love to use multiple running backs in this offense, and I think Justice Hill is their best pure receiving back. So when they want to get maybe a little bit faster and play a little bit more spread and all that, that's when you're going to see Justice Hill come in, and he'll get some opportunities. He'll get a lot of opportunities, considering having Derrick Henry there, who is still a very serviceable receiving back. He'll, screen passes to him and all that. Getting him out in space is incredibly dangerous. Just a matter of being able to pull it off. But then the real heart and soul of what makes this offense truly tick, and it's been this way since Lamar came into the league, is the tight ends. And it starts with Mark Andrews, who really fought off those early season he's washed accusations. He's been a bigger slot guy on most of his snaps. So when they get into that 12 personnel, he'll generally kick out. And it'll be like Zay Flowers and Bateman on the outside, with Andrews being this big slot to create all these matchup issues. He operated really well. He was a great contested catch guy, really reliable when they threw him the ball. Got 11 touchdowns despite his brutally slow start to the season. He's not a run after the catch guy anymore at this point in his career. He's kind of just this possession guy who's going to use his height, use his catch radius to create multiple opportunities and make Lamar's job easier, especially in the middle of the field. Having this type of guy makes things a lot easier for your quarterback. And to operate in those short to intermediate areas, be a big body, be a really precise route runner, despite his dwindling athleticism as he ages and picks up, a couple nicks and knocks and all that, some dents in his armor. I do wonder if he won't get some more inline snaps as throughout this season. That'll be interesting to watch. I was very surprised, actually, when he only had about 20% of his snaps as an inline tight end. Because then you get on to Isaiah Likely, who's another great tight end. And I just think Isaiah Likely is a great complement to him as well. And he got off to an incredibly hot start to his season. He still took half of his snaps from the slot, but he did have almost 33% as an inline tight end. Running him in motions and stuff like that, sort of confusing the opposing defense, because that's the huge advantage of also having two very viable tight ends on the field. Now, the one thing he doesn't have that Mark Andrews has is that contested catch ability. That was always the knock on Isaiah Likely when he came into the league, was he wasn't that physical of a receiver. He wasn't that physical of a tight end. You weren't getting this great blocking tight end by any means. He was like this straight up like athlete receiver, like an oversized wide receiver, playing that oversized slot role. And that's a lot of what he did. But I think because Andrews was just somebody with his experience and his route tree and everything, and his precision in his routes and his footwork and everything, and his catch radius and his sure hands and the contested catch ability, moving Andrews in motion, splitting him out a little bit just made more sense for the offense being able to execute at a higher level. So that's why Likely played probably much more as an inline tight end, especially when Andrews was on the field with him. Now, he had really sure hands. He only had one drop all last year, but his output didn't sustain what it did at the first couple weeks. I don't know why that is. It's just one of those things where, because of how they structure the overall offense, you have all these guys out here, and at any point in time, because they don't have like that true quote-unquote number one wide receiver. We talked about this with Buffalo. We talked about this with Kansas City. When you don't have that, you create an environment where you just get to ride the hot hand until it's not hot anymore, until it cools off. And then you get to the next guy and the next guy. So you'll have weeks at a time where you'll have certain guys here performing at these high levels, and then they'll sort of fall off a little bit and it'll be somebody else's turn, which I'm sure drives fantasy football owners insane. I know I had Mark Andrews last year, and it was not fun those first couple weeks. It was so bad that it's like, oh, I guess he's washed. You drop him, and then he picks it up at the end of the year. So lesson learned on that. But I think they just got so many different weapons here that they can use so many different guys. I think the depth that they have complement each and every one of the starters and the main guys really well. So if you have to play those guys, you don't have to change your offense significantly at all to account for those players. It's just a nice little well-rounded group. I think there's still potential now that Lamar has that added aspect to his game that we could see a Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, or something like that really take another step in their development, because they're going to be given more opportunities to do different things now. Now, I forget the guy's name, but he had a lot to say about what I thought about Josh Jacobs. So if he's watching right now, here you are. Derrick Henry, the number one running back in the entire league for me. Along with Lamar Jackson, the number one running quarterback. And together, this is by far the most frightening, scary running attack in the entire league. Because you have the speed and finesse of Lamar Jackson, and then you just have the beat you up, destroy you, can't stop me power of Derrick Henry, where he had 300 and something carries last year. I think it's like 320 from the looks of it. My math is right, pretty close to that. Math not the strong suit. 323. That's quick math right there. For 1,921 yards, 5.9 yards to carry, 16 touchdowns. He had 79 missed tackles forced, 93 first downs, and 1,137 yards after contact. I don't know what there is even left to say about Derrick Henry, because the fact of the matter is he has been used so much over the last couple of years that he has no business still being this productive. Like, let's be honest. The Titans ran him into the ground. So much so that they looked around when his contract was up and went, yeah, we ran him into the ground. It's over. We got what we wanted out of him. We ruined him. Good luck out there. And then he went, nah, I still got another level to this. And then went out and had probably his best season. Now, does having a guy like Lamar Jackson, which kind of forces the defense to spread it out a little bit, help you? Of course it does. Of course Lamar is a huge factor in his production, but you just watch the way that he was executing. He was the exact Derrick Henry that we were used to seeing. Now, Derrick Henry, despite his size, has never really been somebody who's like this great short yardage back. Not goal line back, but like a short yardage back. Like those, like you're at the 40-yard line and it's 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2. I always cringed when they tried to just hand him the ball like that, because to me, what's always made Derrick Henry great was you would run these outside zones. And he'd get the ball, and he would take a while to get to the top speed, kind of like Usain Bolt. It takes you a while to get top speed. But when you get top speed, you're as fast as anybody. And he's so big, and he's so powerful that he gets the top speed. And if you haven't put your hand on him at that point, then you're in a lot of trouble as a defender. And that's why the outside zone worked so well for him historically in his career, more so than gap runs have, because it allowed him to get to that top speed that kind of takes him a while to get to, but then he would get there, and then by the time he got there, you haven't touched him yet. Now he's at top speed, and he's impossible to bring down at that point. You need a couple guys at that point to bring him down. Now, what Baltimore was able to do really well with him was to create a gap scheme that he was really effective in, where it allowed him, it actually made him a much better short yardage back than he's really ever been in his career. Much significantly better than what Tennessee tried to make him, especially when Dion Lewis was there early on in his career. And then, once he took over that number 1 back role, they never really had an effective short yardage game. He worked really well. You'll see a bunch of highlights of him from this past season on 3rd and 2, executing really well. Now, and that's even against boxes that they kind of stacked. And they kind of hoped that their defensive ends were able to contain Lamar in case he kept it. And they went, we're going to stop Derrick Henry. And they had a really nice gap scheme that they had set up for those short yardage inside runs that Derrick Henry was like as effective as he's ever been. So kudos to Todd Monken for putting that together, and for Derrick Henry to adding that other aspect to his game. So he's a running back. At any point in time, it could all be over. More so than any other position, of course. But at no point last year did he look like he was slowing down. Did it look like he was getting beat up, despite all the production, despite the high volume. It was like he was 25 again. And he had just come into the league. And he was being used the exact way he should have been used in the beginning of his career. And I think now, especially in this offense, because you have Lamar and you're going to be in a situation where defenses just can't stack a box the way they did when he was in Tennessee, that this high volume isn't necessarily going to translate to like being beat up a whole lot. Because he's gonna be getting tackled by defensive backs more often than not because of this. These linebackers are going to be in spy against Lamar, and they're going to be holding it out. So you get him, he gets around that corner of the outside. It's going to be smaller guys that have to chop him down, which makes his job a lot easier. So we'll see how they continue to build on that. But just from a foundational aspect, to have Derrick Henry now, it's the best running back Lamar's ever played with. And it really answered that question of, does Lamar really need like a true top running back to make this run game effective? And it wasn't, and that was a true statement for almost all of Lamar's career. But then you saw what happened when he got this top running back, how it just completely took it to another high level. And he's a huge reason that the running back position, I think, is kind of being brought back here. A lot of credit goes to Saquon Barkley, obviously. But I think because Barkley had such a great year, you kind of forget that Derrick Henry was pretty damn close to having a 2,000-yard season here. Like, he wasn't that far behind Saquon Barkley and Saquon Barkley's performance last year. So look for him to keep building on that. Look for him to still maintain a high level of volume in this offense. And I would look for him to be still incredibly effective. I'd like to watch him continue what he showed in short yardage situations last year, Not goal line. Again, not goal line. Short yardage situations in like the middle of the field, that type of thing. Like to see him continue to build that. Like to see Todd Monken continue to have a strong gap scheme for those situations. Now, the only thing that's a detriment is shockingly the offensive line. Like, you think the offensive line would be much better than what they are, but they've really been carried by how effective Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry in particular were last year. There's just, other than Tyler Linderbaum, there's really no star anymore here. Like, they have Ronnie Stanley, who, I mean, he's not the star he used to be. In run blocking, he's not the same. In pass pro, he's just not the same. The injuries have been a thing for him. I'm surprised they've kept him. I feel like it's run its course. He's not like a top tackle anymore in the NFL. It's just not there. He's not Trent Williams. He's not Laramie Tunsil, Tristan Wirfs. He's not in that category. He's barely a tier 3 guy anymore. Now, he does fall into the category of, if not him, then who? You can't just find a replacement left tackle for him. He's still good enough where there's not many options better than him out there without you being super aggressive the way, say, Washington was in getting Tunsil. But I think if Baltimore knew that was an option, I think they maybe would have made that investment in Tunsil rather than Stanley. That's just me. That's just me talking. But I think because this offense plays so fast and they have so many weapons out there that you can kind of hide the deficiencies that Stanley has. And it's not that big of a deal that he's regressed the way that he has from his peak. Him being poor in the run game, you'd like to see that improve, because I think that an effective run game for this offense is what's really going to make them function and run hard and run forward throughout the majority of the season. And you got Andrew Voorhees next to him, who had some injuries at USC towards the end there, came in, got some starting work, and he's better than the depth they got. They don't have depth here for the offensive line. When John Simpson left, he stepped in, and I think he's somebody that can easily be replaced going into next season if he doesn't perform. I think Tyler Linderbaum as a center has been as good as you could expect from him. This is the kind of center you want. He's not a great pass pro center. But from a run blocking perspective, his athleticism and zone blocking and his ability to get to the double team, get off the double team to the second level, elite levels. And even though he only got a C+ in the gap scheme, he was still a really good part of what made those short yardage gap plays work. So credit to him for that. He could have been better in a lot of situations. I think Derrick Henry did do a lot of work in those gap situations sort of as a solo act more often than he should have. So that's something to improve on for those inside guys. But, Tyler Linderbaum can only do his job, right? You got Andrew Voorhees next to him. You got Daniel Falele next to him as well. So there's only so much you can do. And, he doesn't have, these great guys around him. Roger Rosengarten coming into his second year. Not a bad rookie season at all. I will say that. So we'll see how this second sophomore year comes about for him and how he continues to grow. They brought in Joe Noteboom to be like a swing tackle. Carson Vincent's a rookie. He's going to be there sitting on the bench developing behind the scenes. So we'll see how either one of those guys maybe gets an opportunity at some point if an injury gets picked up. Ben Cleveland's been there a while. He's just not much of anything, to be honest. Lost out on the starting job to Falele and Voorhees, a starting position that he had. So he lost that. So I'm surprised he's still on the team considering that scenario. But he's a veteran who knows Lamar and knows what's expected of him. So he'd be a better replacement player for this team than he would on any other roster. It's just an unimpressive offensive line that on a already great offense that operates at such a high level that they overcome the deficiencies that this offensive line has. And when you have a great athlete like Lamar Jackson, he's able to navigate around pressure and missed blocking assignments and everything a lot easier than a more statuesque quarterback would. But I couldn't imagine what a quarterback like even Joe Burrow would be going through. Joe Burrow doesn't have a great offensive line either, so it's a bad example. But I couldn't imagine what, a lesser quarterback would be going through. Like, okay, we discovered Bo Nix, the number 3 team, the Denver Broncos. Bo Nix has the exact opposite problem. He's got a great offensive line and not a lot of weapons. If Bo Nix had to play behind this offensive line, I think he'd be one of the worst quarterbacks in the entire league. Because he's just brutal under pressure, and when he's blitzed, he's just, So you get one of those type of quarterbacks behind this offensive line, it's a completely different story for this overall offense, its production. So this offensive line, I think if they can step it up and they can get themselves in the top 20, then you truly do have an unstoppable offense at that point. But any deficiencies this offense does have, it's going to be the offensive line that's at fault for it. No question about it. There's way too much talent at the quarterback position, at the running back position, at the wide receiver room, the tight ends, all that. There's way too much talent, way too much depth for them to be the ones that are at fault when things go wrong. So a lot of pressure here. There's a lot of pieces here that need to develop. They've drafted all 5 of these guys. So these are all in-house built offensive linemen, which is another thing to note here. So this is them. They've committed to the process here of these guys. Whether it's Falele and turning him into a guard. Voorhees despite his injuries. Linderbaum in the first round. Rosengarten, I think, was a second-round pick last year. So they're committed to the process here. John Harbaugh is very committed to the process of developing his players, developing his prospects, seeing something in them as moldable prospects, moldable clay, and seeing the process through. So I do anticipate this being the group they run with. This is the group they're going to see the process through. And then we'll see what it looks like at the end of next year if they decide to go a different direction on day 1 and day 2 of the draft and picking up an interior offensive lineman or a tackle. But this is the red flag at the team, of the entire team. I say all that, and they are still the best offense in the league for me. Still the best. The number 3 pass offense, the number 2 rush offense. Again, they have too much talent on this offense that it overcomes. It's one of the few offenses that is so stacked in the skill positions that it can overcome a below average offensive line. Very few offenses can pull it off. This might be one of maybe 2 or 3 offenses in the entire league that could do it. Now moving on to the defensive side of the ball, that on the back end, lots of stars, but we'll start with the defensive line. It's a very balanced group, kind of lacking like a true well-rounded top-end talent. We'll start with Kyle Van Noy here. The 9th in pass rush, 11th in run defense. Very balanced group. They're going to have a nice little healthy rotation going on here. Kyle Van Noy, the veteran in the room, took 599 snaps, 13 sacks, 51st in win rate, 46th in stops. He was all right. 4 missed tackles. He was okay. He was an okay player last year. He was a good veteran presence. 51st in win percentage, which is kind of brutal. But hey, he was still a really good player. Considering he kind of wears a bunch of hats on this team, and at this stage in his career, lots expected of him. I think him coming in and being like a really great part, a featured part of the rotation, is a huge benefit to this team and its production. Then you get Nnamdi Madubuike, who in his contract year had that monster performance. Absolute monster performance. Defensive Player of the Year conversation around him. Big time contract to keep him around. Then he changed his name to Nnamdi, or his name back to Nnamdi, and he kind of regressed. He didn't give out the great performances that he gave that one year where he peaked. And then last year he kind of just did the exact same, which was a good, well-rounded interior defensive lineman who you can kind of play everywhere, who can do everything and do everything well. But Chris Jones, Dexter Lawrence, he is not. I would put Nnamdi Madubuike in the same category as you put, Zach Allen or John Franklin Myers or, Ed Oliver, like he's in that category. I think he's much more well-rounded than Ed Oliver is, obviously. I think he's a lot more well-rounded than Zach Allen and John Franklin Myers as well. But I think that they have aspects of their game that they, from a pass rush standpoint, that they're better than him. DJ Jones is another great example of like that category where you can put a guy out there for 3 downs. You can kind of move him around a little bit, create some matchup issues. He can be a space eater. He can be a guy who rushes the passer from, 4-eye tech, and can penetrate in all, A gap, B gap, C gap. He can be a great stunt guy because he's a good athlete. He falls into that category. I think it's a really good category for him to be in. And it does make him extremely effective. I just think that people that put him as like in that upper echelon of interior defensive linemen, I think are just a little too high on him. I think they're giving him a little too much credence for that one season because, let's be real, before that contract year, he was like a middling at best rotational interior defensive lineman. Then something clicked for him in the Mike McDonald defense, and he was able to get himself to like true starter 3-down caliber. But we'll see if he can get back to that level. He's got great compliments next to him. Travis Jones, great nose tackle, great space eater. Aeneas Peebles is not getting a lot of talk here. He's not listed as a starter. I think by the end of the year he's going to be, because I think from a pass rushing standpoint, he's going to give you a whole lot more than what Broderick Washington is. I think him coming in, he's the best interior pass rusher you got. He's up there as like the best pass rusher you got. I think he's that good. So let's watch for the Virginia Tech guy to show up at some point this season. I think blow people away when he gets the opportunity. After they only kept 4 interior defensive linemen, I think. They might have kept the 5th one. I have to look at that chart again, but 4 of note. So there's not a lot of competition here. So he's going to get his opportunities, and I think he's going to surprise a lot of people that maybe haven't heard his name before. Then you got Dafe Owe on the other side. He's sort of just a faster version of Kyle Van Noy. He's got a lot of balance. I think them drafting Mike Green is their contingency plan, I think, obviously for Kyle Van Noy. And I think Mike Green could be a great contributor. I think you can rotate him in every situation. I think he's a much better run defender than Owe is. I think that he's more similar to Van Noy. Van Noy, I know he's got better grade than Van Noy, but Van Noy can also play like off-ball linebacker, which I think helps and boosts and makes his grading a little bit more impactful. So like there could be a situation where you have Green, Matabuike, Jones, Owe, and then you got Van Noy as like an off-ball backer. I think that could be a situation for sure. The other depth there, they kept Ajabo and they kept Tavius Robinson. So they're going to have 5 edge guys. Ajabo just unfortunately the injuries, that brutal injury he got in the combine. I think it was the combine or his private workout. One of the two. But right before he was ready to be a first-round pick with him and I think that was the year Kwity Paye was picked also. Or was it Aiden Hutchinson? It was Aiden Hutchinson. He just never recovered from it, unfortunately. He's when he's gotten opportunities, he's had some like moments, but it's just not been able to be sustained. I think his time may have passed. I think they put too much investment into the edge room over the last couple of seasons that he can overcome it. I don't think they're anticipating him being anything other than just a depth piece for them, and that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate because I think the prospect of Ajabo and Owe was a really great thing to build upon for your edge room. And I think now, especially them bringing in Mike Green, that kind of just kicks Ajabo right out of what his potential role would have been on this team. So I think that kind of put the writing on the wall. I'm surprised he stayed on the team. I guess he's a good backup for Owe and Mike Green in those scenarios. But also, you got to compete with Tavius Robinson, who I think has a much higher floor than Ajabo does. Even though I grade them out the same in terms of what they can contribute, I think that Robinson's going to give you his top-end performance, whatever that it may be, not the highest ceiling. But I think he's going to give you that more often than Ajabo would, and I think you can rely on him a little bit more. Availability is the best ability, so that's unfortunate. But this has got a lot of potential here. They got some good young players. They have the rookies they added, Peebles and Green. I think that elevates the group, that elevates the rotation, and it makes sure that everyone's going to be performing at a top level when they're on the field. And having a rotation of 5, 6, 7 guys that you can be rotating in for a 4-man front, or you're in base formation, a 5-man, it's invaluable. And it's the sign. It's what keeps a good defense and makes them great, is that type of rotation you can have with your defensive line to keep everybody fresh but still be incredibly effective. Now with the linebackers, they definitely have one of the best linebackers in the entire league in Roquan Smith. This is an interesting pairing, with Trenton Simpson, who hasn't really gotten to the level that I think people were expecting him to coming out of Clemson. I know he had some first-round buzz for a bit there. They did bring in 2 rookie linebackers, which is not a great sign for him at all. Jay Higgins and Teddy Buchanan. Jay Higgins, I think, has a real inside track to steal a lot of snaps from Trenton Simpson this season, so I'd watch out for that. Jake Hummel is, he's a good depth piece and mostly a special teams guy, so I wouldn't be too concerned about him. But they're like a top 10 linebacking group, I think. Some good balance, but, Roquan Smith, perfect 3-down linebacker, green dot guy. He added another level to this defense when he came from Chicago. Last year he was 11th in stops percentage, 103 tackles, under 7% missed tackle rate, which is good by me, especially when he produces at the high level he does on so many different downs. And he comes up huge in so many situations. Didn't allow any touchdowns in the pass game either. Had 3 pass breakups, a 93.5 passer rating, which for a linebacker, you're mostly playing zone anyway. He took his game to like another level. Like, he sort of plateaued there in Chicago for a bit, which is why they were willing to trade him. Contract and all that stuff included as well. But when he was, finding the right gaps and looping in at the appropriate time and timing things up really well. Now, last year, it wasn't his best year for that. But it wasn't by any means like, oh, he's regressed or anything, He's just not as good as Fred Warner, which is fine. I think there's a lot of good linebackers in the league that can produce at high levels. But I think, to say Roquan Smith is like a top 5 linebacker in the league overall, you're definitely not speaking out of turn. I'll say that. There's a lot of people that argue he's the best linebacker in the league. I think that's wrong. If you say he's the number 2 linebacker, I can at least understand that argument. Definitely in the top 5, though. I don't think he should be ranked any lower than 5 by anyone. I think 5 is his floor for where he should be ranked overall. There is concern that he sometimes maybe plays a little too fast. But it's very rare. It's very rare. It's very rare that he's not in the right spot. I've seen him in pass coverage get kind of turned around every now and then, but nothing truly significant where you go, he's not a good coverage linebacker. He's a great coverage linebacker for the most part. Plays really smart in the zones. Does a good job baiting receivers into sitting. In particular, gets really good at disguising the man coverage when they're in zone, disguising the zone, making it look like he's in man on these tight ends. Saw him do it a lot against Pat Freiermuth last year, which really drove Russell Wilson nuts in those games. Go back and watch those games. Go watch some of those reps that Freiermuth was taking. And I think that, Njoku is another one that kind of fell into that category as well. When Roquan Smith was working those tight ends, he worked them pretty damn well. Not having a great compliment next to him, like when he had Patrick Queen next to him, that was a great compliment. Trenton Simpson being his compliment now, I think kind of drags him down a little bit because I think he kind of feels like he's doing his 1 1/4 jobs rather than just one job. Maybe 1 1/2 to sort of account for those deficiencies, sort of make up for that. But I think that Zach Orr can put together a good defensive scheme. I think Zach Orr, now in his second year, can manipulate things a little bit here from a strategic standpoint, an alignment standpoint, to put Roquan in better situations where he's not having to deal with accounting for other people. He can just focus on doing what he's doing and not make a mistake, a small mistake they may be, but still a mistake because he's trying to account for the job of somebody else, which I think you can sort of see those nuances at times when him and Simpson were on the field together. A lot of the times it worked out. Some of the times it didn't, and it kind of left gaps in the field that shouldn't have been there. So we'll see how they adjust to that. But still a great linebacking group. Now, this is a really exciting group here. Full disclosure, before Ardarius Washington got his season-ending injury, this was the number one coverage group in the entire league. Losing him and then Malachi Starks going into the starting lineup, seeing more snaps from other guys like Sanusi Kane more likely and Chidobe Awuzie because of that, drops them to third. So full disclosure on that injury is what caused that. Now, they were a little bit lower until Jair Alexander came in, but let's start with Marlon Humphrey, who is their best corner. And now with Jair here, he's going to settle in and be like definitely the primary slot guy. He took 568 slot snaps and 302 outside corner snaps last year. Those slot snaps are going to be 650, 700 as long as Wiggins stays healthy. He was just an absolute beast. 6 interceptions, 10 pass breakups. He took 11 penalties, but that's just because he plays so aggressively, and he was playing in the slot especially. You're a lot more hands-on. You're naturally a little bit more grabby, so you will take more penalties in that situation just by the way that you have to run that position. Oh, a little stuffy. 51 catches allowed on 83 targets. He was great in zone. He was still great in man. He just did a great job in all aspects of the game last year. And just maintain this high-level performance of you can really kick him anywhere. Like, he's in that category with Jalen Ramsey where you can play him anywhere across the cornerback room, like the traditional cornerback room, like whether it's inside, outside, slot or outside. And he does it at such a high level. Now, him settling in the slot is going to, I think, raise this group up to an even higher level because now you got Jair Alexander, who, as long as he stays healthy, can lock down one side of the field as a shutdown corner as good as anybody. You're just hoping for more health. Last year, 25 targets, 14 catches allowed. He had 3 pass breakups and 2 interceptions, though, despite these low numbers, and only like 350 some odd snaps taken last year. But he's not going to be a slot guy. So that's what I mean. Like, you're not going to kick Jair inside at any point in time. He's going to be your outside guy. He's going to follow around that number one receiver, and you're going to slide all your back-end coverage to the other side of the field because he's got it. And running in great zone coverage, great complement to what they have on the inside now with Marlon Humphrey. It's going to be a nightmare for teams to try and find a good matchup because they just got so many athletes out there now. And then you throw in Nate Wiggins, who's just like this, he's a skinny, lanky guy, but another guy who just, you play him on the outside. I think now in a situation where he's got to be the number 2 guy, he's not a good man coverage corner at all. So you're going to see them run a lot of zone here, especially, when Jair's greatest feature is the zone coverage. And so is Marlon Humphrey's. But now because you have all these guys out there, all these elite level talents, you don't need to really run anything other than a zone. Like, let them use their eyes. Let them use their instincts. They're smart enough to maintain the coverage just long enough. A 50% catch rate against Nate Wiggins, only a 64.6 passer rating allowed. He did a really great job when called upon in zone, doing it against number 2 guys, obviously, because Humphrey was the number 1, following around for a majority of the season, the number 1 wide receiver on the other team. He did take 8 penalties from the outside, which you don't love because generally those are, pass interference penalties deep down the field, giving up free 20-yard plays. But for a rookie performance, it was a great performance. And now he's in a situation where he's going to have all this help with him. So he's going to be able to play maybe a little bit looser, a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more like a ball hawk, and really start attacking the football and attacking those early aspects of the routes to try to cut them off and make big plays that, he didn't really get to make last year. Only had 1 interception. He had 8 pass breakups, but only 1 interception. You like to see that get up there. And I think he's going to get a lot more targets than just 66 this year because of Humphrey and Jair. Just no one's going to want to throw it at them. And I think when you have Chidobe Awuzie as a good depth guy in there, TJ Tampa's another sneaky depth guy. It's a really good 5-man group. Malachi Stark's coming in. He's a bit of a hybrid guy as well, so he can play a whole bunch of different roles, which is what they really love here. It's a shame that Ardarius Washington went down because now they can't really get into those 3 safety sets as much as they would want to because, Sanusi Kane's just not that guy. But, man, Kyle Hamilton, if he's not the number 1 safety in the league, he's number 2, worst case scenario. Just an absolute monster. 80 tackles, 66, only 47 catches allowed, 375 yards on 47 receptions as a safety. Now he plays a lot of different hats. He wears a lot of different hats in this defense. He'll line up in the slot and cover a slot receiver or a tight end. He'll line up, he'll be the 8th man in the box and attack the quarterback. He'll blitz over the A gap and just burn a center to the quarterback. Just embarrass a guy with such a quick get off, with this elite level pass rusher get off. And then he'll play a traditional safety role and he'll run sideline to sidelines and he'll break up a pass deep down the field. He'll bait a quarterback into a bad throw deep down the field and intercept it, or at least break up the pass. It's hard to find a more well-rounded safety in the league. Jesse Bates is a great safety. Xavier McKinney's a great safety. And maybe there's aspects of their game that they're better than him at to some degree. But it's close enough where I'm not mad if people say Kyle Hamilton's the best safety in the league. I can't fathom, when he first came in as a rookie, they did the perfect thing with him. He played one position. He was this box safety for a majority of his rookie season. They're like, this is the role you're playing. You're a box safety / slot guy, but that's where you're playing. You're playing close to the line of scrimmage. That's it. Marcus Williams is going to play deep. Geno Stone is going to play deep. This is where you're going to play. And you're going to master this position. And in that rookie year, it was quick. He mastered that role. Then in his second year, they went, okay, let's expand you a little bit. And that's something that this defense, because they maintain such a level of depth, that they were able to pull off with Kyle Hamilton. Now, that was definitely going to be their plan with Malachi Starks, to do the exact same thing with him, because they had Ardarius Washington. Now with Washington gone, I think that Starks, the speed of his development might be slowed down a little bit, in the sense that he's not going to have the opportunity to master a certain aspect of his game, a certain position in this defense that he can just get comfortable with, not have to worry about getting too exotic, not have to worry about what calls mean for him and all that, and just focusing in on that the way Hamilton was able to build that confidence up and to then understand what an offense is doing, how to attack a certain offense in a certain way in a certain time and time things out. Now Malachi Starks is probably going to have to be more of a traditional safety, which is fine because you've got such great compliments. So he's not going to be in a situation where he's going to be hung out to dry all that often. So I wouldn't be overly concerned about having a rookie in those scenarios, because I think it's going to be a lot of him just, them just dropping coverage over the top of wherever Nate Wiggins is and leaving Jair on an island more often than not. And then letting Kyle Hamilton and Roquan Smith sort of patrol the intermediate levels of the field. And it's just going to be another year of just really effective defensive back play, where this group could be as deadly as any, and this group could also contribute to that front having career numbers, because the amount of coverage sacks they're going to be able to do, they're going to be able to blitz a lot with this group, because this group is going to be sticky. They're not going to get beat off the line. Receivers are going to have a nightmare trying to release off the line against them and get space and get separation early on. So I anticipate this group allowing Zach Gore to be a lot more exotic and a lot more aggressive up front. So overall, it is my 4th ranked defense, number 3 pass defense, number 9 rush defense. And as Zach Gore continues to grow, there's no reason why by the end of the year this can't be the best defense in the entire league. They certainly have the bodies on the back end, and they have enough going on up front in the front seven that it complements everything really well. Now going to their schedule, and it's 11.5 wins. I got them going over. There's 3 games that I'm worried about. Week 1 in Buffalo, Week 4 in Kansas City, and Week 17 in Green Bay. The one in Green Bay is because you're going up against Parsons, Rashawn Gary, and I don't know that your offensive line is going to be able to hold up against that. That's going to be questionable. And from just the way that they match up, it could be a problem. That first game against Buffalo, that can go either way. You can catch them on that. And then a road game in Kansas City, that's a tough place to go. But you got Detroit at home. You got Houston at home. You got the Rams at home. You drew New England at home. This is a very favorable schedule for them as it is, even though it's the 9th hardest schedule in the league. You pretty much got your division on lock. You get Chicago. You get Miami. You get the Jets. It's not that tough. It's a pretty favorable schedule. You get Minnesota. You have to go to Minnesota, but I still think you're still leaps and bounds ahead, especially with J.J. McCarthy there. I think Zach Gore is going to have a field day picking on him. So it's incredibly favorable. They should have the best record in the entire league come the end of the season. So overall, this is my best team in the entire league. 4th best head coach, best offense, and 4th ranked defense. Oh boy, what a time. Can they get over the hump though? There it is, my number 1 team. We made it all the way to the end. The number 1 team, Baltimore Ravens. Don't know if they're going to be the Super Bowl champions, though. Just because, can they get over the hump? They definitely have the talent to do so. They have the coaching staff. They have the culture. They just need to win that big one. And I really appreciate you guys. Again, I said at the top, appreciate you guys making it all the way through all 32 of these videos. All these hours, all this work, all this editing. And I just can't wait to do it again next year. And I can't wait to do videos throughout the season, mock drafts and all that. We'll be doing those throughout the actual regular season, talking about anything big that happens. We'll get to that stuff as well. But this is the bread and butter of the channel. And thank you. And I will see you guys with the next video next time.